Another election video? Sorry, but yes. I've been thinking a lot about this election. It actually connects up to a lot of different ideas I've been expressing on this channel over the years. First off, I'm not a mathematician. This channel's always been focused on philosophy, rule of law, and legal analysis. If you're expecting me to lay out a devastating case of fraud in the election, I'm not going to be the best channel at doing that. Academic Agent would be a good channel to check out. He's an economist and he's not American, which might make him a little bit more objective. What I can tell you is what I do know a lot about. That would be the law. Here's the legal reality of the situation we're in. Rudy Giuliani says he has 11,000 separate reports of voter fraud. Most of these are probably from poll monitors who weren't able to monitor the vote. While you can say that that's not direct evidence of fraud, nonetheless their rights were violated. But we've also got people who witnessed much more concrete voter fraud. Witnesses who saw ballots being filled out by election officials. Ballots being manipulated by having the birth dates changed. Ballots having their dates altered to make them valid. We've also got dead people voting in the election. Some people have been dead a real long time. Now I've seen some of the lawsuits that Giuliani has filed. Some of them have hundreds of pages of sworn affidavits. Giuliani's already won at least one of the lawsuits. Don't let the media gaslight you into believing Giuliani is just some Trump stooge. He's an attorney and a former federal prosecutor. He was the most successful mayor of our largest city. Under his administration, NYC became incredibly wealthy and safe. Many considered what Giuliani accomplished there a full-on miracle. We've also heard all of these reports on glitches with the voting software. Glitches that only seem to ever benefit Biden. We have Democrats recorded prior to the election talking about how a red mirage was going to happen.
That the data is going to show on election night an incredible victory for Donald Trump. That is likely to be what we see when every legitimate vote is tallied and we get to that final day, which will be some day after election day. It will in fact show that what happened on election night was exactly that, a mirage. It looked like Donald Trump was in the lead, and he fundamentally was not.
Isn't it weird? They seem to know what was going to happen on election night ahead of time. For months leading up to this, Democrats have told us Trump is going to cheat. He's the great orange Hitler. But clearly Trump didn't cheat. Were the Democrats just projecting when they said this? Did they cheat because they assumed Trump was also going to do it? Here's what we don't have. Evidence of Democrat poll watchers being denied the ability to monitor the vote. Evidence that any glitch or procedural process violation benefited Trump over Biden. We've seen none of that. We have statistics experts who say the numbers don't make any sense. Using similar methods the CIA uses, they indicate the US results are fraudulent. Again, I'm not an expert in statistics, but that's what we've heard. Well, what about Joe Biden himself admitting to rigging the election? Yeah, we have that.
Secondly, we're in a situation where we have put together, and you guys did it for our administration, the President Obama's administration before this. We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
Then we also have all the weird numbers. This election had the most votes of any election. Voter turnout was way up in the swing states, but in the non-swing states, not so much. 90% of people in Wisconsin supposedly voted. 90%. There were a huge amount of votes that were only for Joe Biden. No down ballot boxes checked. That's why Republicans gained House seats despite Trump supposedly losing the election. We've got the James O'Keefe story. A postal worker comes out and says that supervisors instructed him to collect all of the ballots after the deadline. This would allow them to backdate the ballots fraudulently. The worker was interrogated by a postal inspector. The postal inspector then indicated that he recanted, but the worker has denied recanting anything. That didn't stop Google from burying the story under numerous fact check articles. Then we get the audio from the interrogation, and guess what? No retraction, just threats being made against the witness.
I'm not scaring you, but I am scaring you here, okay? If we are not 1,000% accurate with our honesty, and it can be argued that money was gained by, I'm going to say assumptions, they're going to say deceptions, that is you could be held accountable for.
Then you have the issue of Trump's lawyers continuously being threatened into quitting. Does that sound fair to you? Is our election fair when one side can't have legal representation due to threats? If you were President Trump and people were threatening to kill your lawyers, would you concede the election to the people making the threats? Yeah, I don't think so. The media pretends like Joe Biden won. They won't cover Giuliani. They don't cover these lawsuits. People who talk about the election on social media get censored or suppressed. Here's where it gets even crazier. This isn't just happening in America. It's happening all across the world. If you're a French person voicing skepticism about the election, you get censored. Again, not even China tries to censor people's opinions in foreign countries. This is perhaps the most totalitarian suppression of information the world has ever seen. Then the media lies to us and says there's no evidence of fraud. No evidence, huh? What about 11,000 witnesses? What about hundreds of pages of affidavits? What about people threatening Trump's lawyers? What about Benford's law? What about mass censorship going on? What about Biden's very own statement? What's obvious is we're being lied to. I'm going to use a Mencius moldbug analogy. Moldbug came up with the theory of the cathedral after watching the media reaction to the Swift Boats for Truth. This is how he described it. Imagine you're watching a soccer game, or football if you're not from the US. You're halfway through the game and the ref blows the whistle. He then pulls out a blue card. What the hell is a blue card? The next thing you see is the ref takes out a handgun and he shoots one of the players, killing them. The game is then called in favor of the other team. Now, if you were watching this game, there's a good chance you'd have no idea what you just watched. What you would know, though, is that this wasn't a legitimate game of soccer. That's the conclusion that I think nearly everyone on the right is reaching right now. The majority of the population of our country doesn't believe Joe Biden won. So what are the consequences of this? Well, let's look at Aristotle's political philosophy. We're supposed to be a republic. The republic failed, though. So we can go one of two ways. If Joe Biden becomes president, then the US becomes a plutocracy, aka an oligarchy. If they get away with cheating this time, it'll be easy for them to repeat the process. Remember, Biden ran on no platform. It's reasonable to expect that he plans on delivering absolutely nothing to the people. He clearly has no interest in running a republic. What he wants is the power of his own plutocracy. The second possibility is Trump refuses to stand down. In that case, we become a royalty. What Aristotle would tell you is that it's better to move this direction than this direction. We're in a very similar situation to Russia after the Cold War. After the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia became a liberal democracy. The problem is Russia's government didn't direct its efforts to benefit the Russian people. There was way too much self-dealing and corruption. Russia was headed towards becoming a plutocracy. So what ended up happening? Vladimir Putin emerged as a populist. At least in the beginning, he fought to give the Russian people a better deal. The Russian people appreciated him for that and supported him. So it reached a point where Putin was so popular and the plutocracy so unpopular that a republic wasn't going to be sustainable. In other words, Russia had to choose between a royalty and a plutocracy. You may say I'm giving Putin too much credit here. I kind of agree. I think Putin has fallen into some old Soviet habits. He's not the populist champion of the Russian people that maybe he once was. That being said, he was very popular at the time he ended democracy in Russia. I think that popularity was rational. It's very rational for people to prefer to live under a royalty than a plutocracy. Now, I did a video a while ago on none other than Osama bin Laden. Now, 9/11 was terrible. Osama killed our people. I don't sympathize with him. That being said, Osama bin Laden was a conservative. He's the man most responsible for taking down the second most powerful empire in history. I'm talking about the Soviet Union. I also said that in that video, time would tell if he also took down the most powerful empire of all time. And by that, of course, I mean the United States. I believe that question is about to be answered. The never-ending wars Osama baited us into led us into the situation we're in today. One where our republic failed. One where the only options are to become a royalty or a plutocracy. In other words, Osama is about to win his war against the West. So where do we go from here? I've said repeatedly that Biden isn't a socialist. He's a neoliberal. Pretty much the only things he's campaigned on is starting wars in Syria and Brazil. If Joe Biden isn't a leftist, then what is he? Well, I guess I would say Joe Biden is right-wing. He's a right-wing neoliberal. When Jimmy Dore, who, don't mistake this for me respecting that guy, I don't respect Jimmy Dore. But when Jimmy Dore says that this election was a choice between two right-wing candidates, he was 100% correct. So we have a right-wing candidate who won by fraud, who's having the entire world censored right now. The entire world is being prevented from having a full and honest discussion about this election. The only things Joe Biden really appears interested in this point is starting more wars. So what would you call something like this? A totalitarian, militaristic, right-wing ideology. Yeah, I'd call that fascism. The tree of liberty must be refreshed with the blood of patriots, as it is said. Our ancestors sacrificed their lives to fight fascism in Germany and Japan. If we have to fight fascism in our own country, we will. That's not me being a pundit. I'm not saying this is something that we need to do. What I am saying is it's something that's going to happen. And I believe it's the reason we have a new Secretary of Defense. To defeat fascism, FDR became essentially dictator of the US. And then after the war, American democracy was restored. That may be the process that's starting to play out right now. Anyways, if you enjoyed this content and you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please support small YouTube channels like mine by subscribing. Thanks.